Hey everybody, welcome back to American Government and Politics, Simmons College, Political Science 101. I want to thank you all who continued to comment that you watched the videos. Don't forget to leave a comment on this one, that you watched it. That's how you get your participation, or I should say your attendance grade in this course, your attendance credit, which is required by the college, and your participation grade, which is a huge part. I believe it's 50% of your grade for the course. Will be when you not only comment that you saw the video, but please post any thoughts or comments or criticisms that you have. Well, if it's a really harsh criticism, maybe you should reach out to me directly. But you know what I mean. Some of you have posted some very thoughtful comments on there, on the YouTube video, so thank you for that. Next quiz is coming up in, about 2 weeks? A little under 2 weeks, on the March 15th, a little less than 2 weeks. So today's video will be very straightforward, a little simpler than the last couple of videos, but still important stuff. In the supplement to the syllabus, it mentions for this part of the semester, it mentions the differences in the American system of government and foreign systems. There's a major difference that is not unique for the United States, but it's different than countries that have some similar historical ties to us. Countries like the United Kingdom, like Great Britain, England, and some other European countries. And there's a major similarity in our style of government that we share with a lot of South American countries and Caribbean countries. What am I talking about? Well, we have a presidential republic. Republic being a form of government where the people, the voters, elect representatives who make the decisions of the government. Theoretically, the decisions of the people. The people elect those representatives, and then those representatives make decisions on our behalf. Now, is it a perfect system? No, in large part because not everybody has access to the ballot box. Not everybody can just go vote because they want to go vote or because they should constitutionally have that right. But we have a republic with the president, who is both head of state and head of the executive branch of the government. When I say head of state, what does that mean? The head of state is the person who is the ultimate authority when it comes to dealing with other countries on behalf of their country. In the United States, the president is the head of state. There's going to be some meeting of foreign country leaders, and they're going to negotiate treaties or work out trade deals, whatever they're going to do. The president has the right, as head of state, to be representing this country, the United States, in those kinds of meetings. They can delegate that, and they do delegate that to their staff members and cabinet members, particularly Secretary of State. They do that all the time, but the point is, the president is the head of state. What about other countries? I mentioned the presidential republics where you have the legislative branch and a separate executive branch by a separately elected president. That's common in Central America, particularly South America, and it is our form of government here in the United States. If you watch any news at all, you probably heard some mention of parliamentary systems. A parliamentary democracy or a parliamentary government. You may have heard some mention of prime ministers. In fact, I'm sure some of you read enough news, you read about the Prime Minister of England, the Prime Minister of some other European country. What is a prime minister? It's a totally different thing than a president. But you'll see the prime ministers of those countries in the news. You open the news apps on my phone, and I see the president of our country always in some meeting or shaking hands with the prime minister of some other country. What's the prime minister? A prime minister is the head of the government of those countries, not necessarily a head of state. I'm throwing a bunch of terms around that may or may not be on the quiz, but it's not that complicated. It's just terms that sound similar and are pretty similar, honestly. But it's just the very small bit that I'm going to do this whole semester on foreign governments. Just see and know how they're different from ours and how their people, the votes of the people in some other countries impact their government differently than our votes do in this country. So let's take the United Kingdom. That's Great Britain. That's the government located in England, over in Europe. What do they do? And why am I using them as an example? Because this country has an inextricably connected history to the United Kingdom. We used to be part of that country. We did. I've talked a lot about the history of slavery in this class. Well, you wouldn't have it without the British or the Portuguese. It's a whole different story. But you wouldn't have American slavery, the Triangle Trade, the Middle Passage, without an economic system that was set up in the Western Hemisphere by Great Britain. All right. Okay, so they have a parliamentary system. They have a prime minister. Right now, it's a man named Boris Johnson. I'm not going to say anything inappropriate about another person's appearance on here, but I highly recommend, if you don't know who he is, do a Google image search of Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of Great Britain. Man has an interesting haircut. Just Google it. You'll see what I'm talking about. He has a haircut that you do not normally see on someone who is a politician, much less one of the most powerful politicians in the whole world. That doesn't make him a bad prime minister. Some of his policy positions might make him a bad leader, but I just think it's interesting whenever politicians have odd haircuts. That being said, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, you'll hear him referred to as the Prime Minister of England, they're a member of Parliament. So think of Parliament, it's kind of like Congress. We have three branches of government in the United States that are distinct. Congress is the legislative branch, as you all know. In a parliamentary system, like in Great Britain, they have two chambers, two houses, just like we have. We have a House and Senate. They have a House of Lords and the House of Commons. That is Parliament. That's the legislative branch. But the head of government, the person who most often represents the government in foreign affairs, is a member of Parliament. Traditionally, they are the person in Parliament who has the respect and commands the leadership of the majority party in Parliament. So step back a minute. In the United States, House and Senate, almost every member, of the House and Senate are either Democrat or Republican. And there are party leaders. You've no doubt heard of Kentucky's Senator Mitch McConnell, who is now the Senate Minority Leader, meaning that he is the leader of the minority party in the Senate. For, I think it was 6 years prior to that, he was the Senate Majority Leader, meaning he was the most powerful person in the Senate. He was elected by the majority party members in the Senate as their leader, which means he had a lot of power. He got to decide which pieces of legislation came to vote before the Senate and which ones didn't. It's a huge amount of power. Over in the House of Representatives in Washington, you have something similar. You have the Speaker of the House. The Speaker is same thing as the Senate side. They just call it something different. The Speaker is elected by the majority party. That person is the leader of the majority party. Right now it's Nancy Pelosi. But that's the United States, where you have a legislative branch and a distinctly different executive branch. And the president is elected by the Electoral College, but is elected in a roundabout way, sort of, by the people. Where in a parliamentary system, they have a leader of the party, the majority party. That's the prime minister. That is someone who is in charge of the government by virtue of controlling a majority of the votes in the House of Commons, in the case of England, but in the Parliament, in the majority of the impactful votes in the Parliament. And that system is common. I believe most European countries have parliamentary systems today, but then the presidential republics like we have with a separate executive branch, like a totally different thing in the government, that's common in The Americas, particularly South America, United States, obviously, and then also in Central Asia, um, Australia, some of the Pacific Island nations. At this point, I'm just rambling about trivia. What I want you to know is that not every system of government in the world looks like ours. Of course, historically, it used to have a lot more monarchies. What is a monarch? An absolute monarch is one person is the government, not just the leader of the government, like the prime minister, not just the head of state, like the president, who also has to deal with the Congress and the judicial branch, but a monarchy is a sovereign. That is someone that is in charge of government. There aren't too many of those left in the world. There are several still. Perhaps the most obvious example in a nation that is an internationally powerful nation would be Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, the head of the House of Saud is the king of the country. I mean, a king, like an absolute monarch. England used to have that. France certainly used to have that. Most nations have had that. Well, okay, most what are now nations had that at some point, but the United States came about at a time in history when countries were getting away from that whole absolute monarchy thing because they'd seen how corrupting they can be, how a monarchy does not have to have the interests of the people. A monarch too often is dominated by only their own interests, and they're not even scared about the people disagreeing with them in large numbers. That's all I'm going to say about that today. If we have time, I'm going to look at the next two lectures, and I know I've got to cover a little bit more in the syllabus to get to the next quiz. If we have time, I'll talk about some other stuff like oligarchies, which are one of, to me, the most interesting forms of government. It's not a good thing. It's not so, you don't want to live in an oligarchy, but it's interesting. They are interesting forms of government, and I'll talk more about that if there's time next week. But until then, that's the basics of a parliamentary system, the difference between their system and ours. For the rest of the semester, I'll be focused on our government, how our government works, or how maybe it should work if we actually followed our own Constitution. Everybody stay safe, stay warm. Hope you and your families are having a good week. I will talk to you all soon.